Good morning, eights. Mr. Westra here with Half Brother reading number 7. Just wanted to give you a real quick recap of where we've been with Half Brother. The last time we read, Ben was biking around with his friend Tim and his friends, and they ended up in a construction site. They were found out, and they ended up scurrying home to get away from the guy that showed up. Richard voiced concern over the friends that Ben was hanging out with and thought that he should be going to the private school, Windermere School. While they were eating at the table, Zan bit Richard, and Richard bit Zan back on the ear, and that is where we pick it up this morning. So, we're reading Chapter 5, Beaver Lake. Jennifer Godwin and I lay side by side on the sand. It was the day after Dad had bit Zan. David had called me up and asked if I wanted to go to Beaver Lake with him and Jennifer. Maybe his father had put him up to it. I didn't know. I didn't care. I was here, beside Jennifer. David's older brother Cal had picked me up in the station wagon. He was 17 and had his license. He'd brought one of his own school friends, and they didn't have much to say to us. At the lake, they didn't even want to put their towels near us. Right now, they were down in the water, throwing a football around, showing off how hairy their chests were. David was stretched out on my other side, tanning his front. I was pretty nervous, being in my bathing suit around Jennifer Godwin. She was wearing a red one-piece. I was relieved to see that she didn't have really large breasts. I think that would have finished me off. She wore her hair in a ponytail. Being so near her, I couldn't really relax. I had a magazine, but I was just staring at it, not reading. It was all just letters and colors on the page. I couldn't get over all her bare skin, all of her, stretched out on her stomach. She was reading a book called I Capture the Castle. Is it good? I asked. She nodded. Pretty good. What's it about? Well, these two sisters who live with their crazy writer father in a castle. They both fall in love with the same guy. Your back's getting a bit red, I told her. She raised herself up on her elbows and looked over one shoulder to see. Where? Just near the middle, where it scoops down. She passed me her bottle of suntan lotion. Could you put some more on, please? She asked politely. Yep, I said, trying to sound like girls ask me this practically every day. I squirted some lotion onto my hands and rubbed them. I didn't want my hands to be cold on her skin. When I touched her back, it felt really hot and amazingly soft and smooth. I didn't push too hard. I rubbed the lotion in carefully. I wanted to make sure I covered every inch of exposed skin. I think that's good, she said, without looking up from her book. Yeah, I didn't want to miss any spots, I said. It really is pretty red. Thanks, she said, and turned the page of her book. She seemed pretty involved in it. David and I did most of the talking. He told me stuff about Windermere, which teachers were cool and which ones were total goofs. I was looking forward to going there now. I liked David, and Hugh and Evan had seemed nice too. It was good knowing I already had a couple of sort of friends. Later, when Jennifer went to take a dip, I said to David, Is your sister going out with anyone? Why, thinking of asking her out, he asked. The way his lips curled told me I'd made a mistake. No, I was just wondering. She's not allowed to date till she's 16. House rules. Oh, sure, that's a pretty good rule, I said. I didn't care. I'd put suntan lotion on her back. We were practically dating. A couple of days later, I woke up with the feeling something was wrong. I checked my clock radio and saw it was 7:20 in the morning. Since Zan had arrived, I'd been waking up whenever he did, because the university had hooked up this radio monitor between Zan's bedroom and Mum and Dad's. When Zan woke up in the night, or in the morning, we'd hear him crying out for us, and someone would go down to him. He was usually awake by 7, but I hadn't heard a peep from the monitor. It was Saturday, and Mum and Dad were sleeping in. I waited another 10 minutes and then went downstairs and let myself into his suite. He was still asleep, which was unusual. Before I even touched his little body, I could feel the heat coming off of it. He stirred and made a moaning sound. When I picked him up, he was limp and trembling. Right away, I carried him upstairs to Mum and Dad. I think Zan's sick, I said. Mum and Dad sat up in bed, and I passed Zan to Mum. He's got a fever, said Mum. A big one. Dad was looking really worried, and he almost never looked worried. That made me freak out big time. Call the vet, I said. No, the university arranged to have a medical doctor for him, said Dad, hopping out of bed. I've got the number. He went to his study and I heard him talking on the phone. Mum and I got dressed. We tried to give Zan a bottle, but he seemed too dopey to take much of it. It seemed forever before the doctor arrived. But when I looked at the clock, I saw that it was only 45 minutes. He examined Zan in the living room. Pneumonia, he said. He'll need antibiotics. It seems strange that he could have pneumonia in the summertime. I can give a liquid for him, said Dr. Jakes. Is he taking his bottle? Mum shook her head. Not properly. We'll need to set him up with an IV then. It's in my car. Is it serious? I asked, my voice shaking. Yes, said the doctor, but he'll be okay. He had a hard time getting a needle into Zan's thick skin. I winced every time I saw the tip jabbing him. Zan was too sick to do more than whimper. Finally, the doctor managed to get the needle into the vein, and he set up the IV stand. Soon a plastic bag of antibiotics was dripping into Zan. I'll come back at the end of the afternoon, said Dr. Jakes. Call me if there's any big change, though. I couldn't eat my breakfast. I felt guilty. Maybe we should have been dressing Zan more warmly when we took him outside into the backyard. His body was made for the tropics, not for Victoria, even though it was a nice warm summer. Dad stayed home all that day and seemed just as concerned as Mum and me. Zan kept sleeping, which Mum said was good, because he wouldn't be ripping out the IV and the drugs could do their work making him better. Mum held him on the sofa, and I held him too. His little body was hot and limp. I was worried he'd die. He seemed so helpless. He didn't have a real mother or father anymore, or brothers or sisters. He really needed us. I looked at him, and I didn't think chimp. I just thought, Zan. The next morning, Zan was more alert when he woke up. By noon, he'd ripped out his IV. I got really worried then, because how was he going to get his medicine? Every drop counted. But when the doctor came by an hour later, he was delighted and said Zan was obviously on the mend. He left us with some liquid antibiotics to put in his milk. Mum went into the kitchen right away to fix him a bottle and a dose. When she came back to the sofa to feed him, Zan took the bottle eagerly in his feet, sucked for a minute, and then reached out for me with his arms. Mum smiled. I think he wants you to feed him. Really? I said, smiling. She passed him into my lap, where he sat, happily sucking away. And then I did something I had never done before. I kissed him on the head. And we'll stop there. That's the end of part 1, and we'll pick up part 2 in just a second.